Scotland is a historic country with a vibrant culture and outstanding landscapes. It also has a storied past and a penchant for the dark and disturbing. Additionally, it is the nation where the notorious grave robbers Burke and Hare were raised, which has led to the exploitation of the spooky criminals as tourism attractions. Scotland undoubtedly has a mysterious and dark past. Scotland is a place with many sinister turns, from unsolved murders to enigmatic disappearances to serial killers who have evaded capture. If you dare, let's plunge in to learn more. Number 10. The Dundee mysterious hangman. To want to be a hangman, you need a certain kind of morbid interest, yet in the 19th century, Scotland was where hangings were most popular, not Dundee. No one in Dundee wanted to be the hangman after the Jacobite uprisings and the mass executions. It makes sense, right? Therefore, Dundee did not have a hangman from 1745 until 1835. That changed when a problematic group known as the Black Band showed up and started terrorizing the city. Mark Devlin, a member of the gang, was eventually apprehended and given a hanging death sentence. The issue was that they had to fly the hangman out from Edinburgh. The city decided to ask the locals for volunteers when there were only a few hours left and the professional hangman was nowhere to be found. One of them agreed, but only if he could hide his identity by donning a mask. Mark Devlin was hanged, but no one knows for sure who did it. However, we do know that it was a morbid Dundee local who was aware of the negative publicity being a hangman would bring. Number 9. The case of Madeline Smith. The murky deeds of Madeline Smith. As history has repeatedly demonstrated, progressive and compassionate women frequently endure atrocious treatment. Madeline Smith, a daughter of an aristocrat, made the choice to follow her heart and have an affair with Pierre-Emile Langelier, a young nurseryman. Oh, to be 20 once more. It's obvious that the match didn't excite her parents. They instead arranged for Madeline to meet a wealthy suitor. Langelier threatened to reveal some of the 250 letters she had written to him and contact the press when she tried to end her relationship with him. That was obviously not an option given her family's reputation. After that, Langelier inexplicably succumbed to arsenic poisoning. Evidently, the authorities discovered the letters, noticed that Madeline had lately purchased arsenic, and connected the dots. Cut to a blistering and well-attended trial that focused more on a woman's moral character than it did on finding proof of a murder. As a result, there was insufficient evidence to get a conviction, but the harm had already been done, forcing Madeline to go to London. Life is difficult for women. Number 8. Assassination of Marion Gilchrist. Case of Marion Gilchrist's murder. Real life has reopened. Holmes, Sherlock. Throughout history, prejudice has been pervasive, and Scotland is no exception. When a Jewish immigrant named Oscar Slater was found guilty of murdering a well-known spinster named Marion Gilchrist in 1909 by hitting her with a hammer, there was a grave injustice committed. Only a brooch was taken by the murderer when a neighbor stopped the burglary. The biased legal system at the time just required the evidence that Slater later pawned a brooch and had a ticket to New York. He had originally been given a death sentence, but it was eventually reduced to a life term. Famous novelist Arthur Conan Doyle published a pamphlet regarding the lack of evidence in the case, which caused a major commotion. Slater received £6,000 in compensation and was released almost 20 years later. The most spooky aspect: never was the real murderer identified. Number 7. Who was the Red Fox's murderer? Case of Marion Gilchrist's murder. Real life has reopened. Holmes, Sherlock. Throughout history, prejudice has been pervasive, and Scotland is no exception. When a Jewish immigrant named Oscar Slater was found guilty of murdering a well-known spinster named Marion Gilchrist in 1909 by hitting her with a hammer, there was a grave injustice committed. Only a brooch was taken by the murderer when a neighbor stopped the burglary. The biased legal system at the time just required the evidence that Slater later pawned a brooch and had a ticket to New York. He had originally been given a death sentence, but it was eventually reduced to a life term. James of the Glen was executed unavoidably by the most biased jury in history, which was presided over by the clan chief and primarily comprised of Campbell family members. But it was obvious he wasn't the murderer. Even though it has been speculated that younger Stuart clan members were responsible, nothing has been shown to be true. Number 6. The mystery of Mrs. McCrae. Family's plea. On the 42nd anniversary of Renee and Andrew McCrae's disappearance in 1976, when Scottish history was just getting started, the Mrs. McCrae mystery arose. It's been a major mystery for nearly 50 years as the longest-running missing persons case in Britain. Mrs. McCrae and her son Andrew appeared to have crashed their automobile as they were traveling to see her sister in Inverness. A passing bus driver who saw the burning car made the assumption that this was the case, however, it has never been proven. What is the strange and eerie thing? Since then, neither Mrs. McCrae nor Andrew have been seen alive or dead. The purported married lover of Mrs. McCrae, William McDowell, has long denied any participation in the disappearance. He was ultimately detained in 2019 and tried in 2022 for the deaths of the mother and son. Despite the defense's claims that there was no proof of a murder and that his client was innocent, he was pronounced guilty. Number 5. The fairy caskets. What we know about Edinburgh's mysterious miniature coffins. What could be spookier than a pile of little coffins concealed in the hillside? You start to get the eerie vibes connected with Edinburgh's fairy coffins when you add in the mystery of not knowing who did it, why they're there, or what they symbolize. 17 tiny coffins with tiny wooden figures inside were discovered in 1836 by a group of boys who were exploring Edinburgh's famous Arthur's Seat Hill. The coffins were concealed behind some slate. Although there wasn't much interest at first, they only sold the whole lot for £4. They were now purchased by the National Museum of Scotland, where mysteries and conspiracies are still very much alive. For witchcraft, perhaps. Was it a ceremony? Was there a Burke and Hare related message? The unknown. Number 4. Bible John, the most notorious unknown murderer in Scotland without a serial killer. This list would be incomplete, yet in Glasgow in the 1960s, Bible John rose to legendary status. Bible John started using the tights of the women he was raping and strangling while stalking the well-known Barrowland Club. What is the origin of the name? Some witnesses asserted that he read Bible verses to his victims as he attacked them, notably portions from the Old Testament. Even creepier is the fact that justice has not yet been done and Bible John's identity is still unknown. Number 3. The Ninth Lost Legion. What happened to the Roman Ninth Legion that was lost? It is no secret that Scotland has a brutal and protracted history of warfare, particularly against England. When the Roman Empire conquered what was then known as Britannia between AD 100 and 190, Emperor Augustus also wanted to conquer Caledonia to the north, which was practically what is now known as Scotland. He dispatched the Ninth Legion to Caledonia to battle the clans in order to finish this challenging mission. There was a lot of confidence because the Ninth Legion had achieved success throughout the empire. The entire legion, though, seemed to vanish from all records. Even though it happened 2,000 years ago, the Romans were fastidious about keeping track of their military formations. It is assumed that their annihilation took place in such an embarrassing spectacle that no one wanted to record it in the history books. It's also claimed to have served as the construction fuel for Hadrian's Wall. Number 2. The disappeared keepers of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. According to Oscar Wilde, losing one lighthouse keeper would be considered a disaster, losing both seems reckless. In the end, the Flannan Isles suffered 3 defeats, and Wilde had nothing to say about it. In Scotland, this pattern of missing lighthouse keepers has given rise to a chilling urban legend. 3 lighthouse keepers who rotated their shifts in the 1900s all vanished without a trace. They were going to be joined by a 4th lighthouse keeper who was traveling over on the Hesperus. A lighthouse keeper's primary responsibility is to make preparations, but upon closer scrutiny they discovered that none had been made. None of the 3 men could be located on the island when they arrived, and they haven't been seen since. Number 1. The arm of Aberdeen Harbour. A lost teen, a washed-up limb, and a sizable riddle to solve. Although it sounds like the opening of a Scandi noir play, Elizabeth, Betty, Haddon, an Aberdeen resident, experienced it firsthand in 1945. On December 12, a blood-curdling scream was heard, and an arm was later discovered in Aberdeen Harbour. They concluded that it was Betty's arm, which had been severed with a knife, but the killer's identity is still unknown. Since there were no leads, local girls volunteered to scream in various parts of the city to try to figure out where the incident might have taken place. Sadly, Betty's body was never discovered, and her perpetrator was never punished.